Hi there, Texas history teachers, and welcome to our Unit 3 preview. This is going to be a preview of our unit on the Republic of Texas. So this is looking at moving away from the Mexican Revolution, looking at the establishment of settlements in Texas, as well as the Texas Revolution. So just a quick overview. Students are going to explore the relationship between identity and government in this unit. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in our statement of inquiry in just a second. There are two main themes throughout this unit. The first one being conflict. So we're looking at what happens when different groups differ on their most cherished values. So we're going to see Mexican values versus Anglo values and what happens when the two of those collide. And just a spoiler alert, it happens to be conflict, which is why it's one of the themes of our unit. And then the second theme of our unit is identity. The Anglo settlers at this time really struggle with their identity, conflicting between the U.S., where most of them are from, and the Mexican identity that's being imposed on them. And then we also discuss how they, again, acquire a U.S. identity through Texas annexation to the United States. So first we're going to talk about stage 1 of the unit plan. And if you haven't done so already, I would go ahead and pause this video and pull up your unit plan so you can follow along. Just like in every unit preview, I'm not ever always able to cover everything. But I can cover a lot of the big points and then answer any questions that you have on a one-off. If you want to email me or text me, I'm always available to do that. So looking at stage 1, our global context for this unit is identities and relationships. When we talk about identities and relationships, IB is really asking us to explore identity formation, values and beliefs, human relationships such as in families, friendships, communities, and cultures. And it also asks us to explore this idea of competition and cooperation. Now, how we are going to look at this global context in our class is looking at the identity of Anglo settlers in Mexican Texas and how they form their identity in this space. We're going to look at the values of the Anglo settlers and the Mexican government and also look at how those two differ. And finally, we're going to look at the relationships between Anglo settlers in Mexico and ultimately look at how the identities of those two separate groups end up leading to conflict. And that leads me right into our statement of inquiry, which is that people will revolt if they do not feel a sense of identity within their system of government. So how this relates to our unit is that the Texans do not identify with Mexico in many ways, and students will be able to explore that throughout this unit. They identify much more with the system of governance in the United States, probably because most of them come from the United States. So for example, they want the freedom to govern themselves and to choose their own religion, but Mexico and their government doesn't allow them to do this. So as a result, the Texans revolt in hopes of being a part of something they can feel a sense of identity with. So they're looking to break away from something that they don't identify with to move towards the identity or the value system that they came from in the United States. For this unit, our inquiry questions, they're listed up here and they are on our unit plan. The ones that I want to focus on, as always, are the debatable questions. Students are going to be able to explore what they'd be willing to fight for. And even asking this question, is disliking a system of government enough of a reason to fight against it? It's a really great place to incorporate some current events, knowing that a lot of policy in our current American government are things that students feel strongly about. You can ask them questions around what is worth fighting for, and is the dislike, just simply disliking something in the government, enough to fight against the government, or like what would it take to sort of unify and create a movement against the government? And I think that'd be really interesting for students to talk about. As always, you can incorporate these questions in hooks, do nows, closures, essay assignments. You could ask students to put themselves in another's shoes and ask these questions. For this unit, I really love in the lesson where we talk about the Alamo, giving students the trailer to the movie The Alamo and asking them the question that's posed in the trailer, which is, what are you willing to fight for or even die for? And I think you get a lot of really interesting student responses in that. And then you even get to push into that debatable question of what is worth fighting for? Is it worth fighting against the government if you dislike it? And what would it take to fight against a system of government? Now we're going to move into stage 2, which is our assessment. This is ultimately what students are building towards throughout the course of the unit. It is a performance assessment in the GRASPS format. So the student's goal is to create 4 letters of their thoughts and experiences during the course of the Texas Revolution. So they'll take on the identity of a Texas Revolutionary soldier, and they have to pretend that they're writing back home about their experiences in all of the battles throughout the Texas Revolution. And they have to talk about what their outcomes are, what their thoughts and feelings are about what they're experiencing, and really have to take on this persona to share the identity and the sort of the change in identity for a Texan, moving from having a forced Mexican identity to fighting for this Texan identity, and ultimately seeking to be a part of this United States identity. There is an exemplar letter available on Blackboard, as well as some additional resources for the project packet. This does connect to our SOI because scholars are able to explore the feeling of the Texans throughout the time of the Texas Revolution. Many of these people believed that the Mexican system of government was unfair and brutal, so they didn't feel a sense of identity within their system of government. So as a result, there is this revolt, there is this conflict. So scholars get to explore how the lack of identity with the system of government ultimately led to conflict, which is our SOI. Just a couple of resources and tips. As always, the Bullock Museum website is a great resource for Texas history, as well as the Texas State Historical Society. For this unit, I would also look at the UNT Primary Source Adventures. They have some great sources for the battles themselves that students can look at as they're taking on the persona of a soldier. Those are linked in the unit plan. And then, as always, the rubrics are also a great resource. This will assess criteria A, which is knowing and understanding, and criteria C, which is communicating. I have these broken down by point bands in the unit plan, but if you ever need a second to talk through rubrics or grade together, just let me know. As always, I'm happy to help. I know that rubrics are not the easiest thing to incorporate into classes and to make scholar friendly, so if you want to have a thought partner on how to do that with this project, I'm happy to be that person. And of course, as always, if you don't want to do letters, you don't have to. The idea is that the GRASPS or the performance assessment really does allow scholars to address the SOI, and that it allows them to engage with the majority of the content from the unit. So if you don't want to do that in a set of letters, you could also consider doing a PowerPoint presentation. Scholars could do a poster. They could write a biography or an autobiography. They could write a report. They could even do a visual presentation, such as a video, or they could do a commercial that's trying to persuade someone of something. You really can be as creative with it as you'd like. But again, the goal is that students are able to engage with that SOI and most of the content from the unit. And finally, we're going to move on to stage 3. This is our day-to-day planning. Our learning experiences for this unit are intended to create a wide variety of experiences for kids, and also intended to weave in opportunities for students to practice ATLs and interact with the SOI. I'm about to go into how students are able to practice the ATLs and the SOI in just a second, but I did want to point out just a few things in this unit. We do have a lot of graphic organizers, a lot of opportunities for students to visually and graphically share information. There are a few readings for this unit. There's a lot of opportunity for students to engage with primary source documents. You can give them the text of the law of April 6, 1830. You can give them the text of the Turtle Bayou resolutions. There's a lot of paintings that you can give them for the different battles of the Texas Revolution. You can give them the text of the Texas and the U.S. Declarations of Independence. So there's a lot of really cool opportunities for students to engage with text that is quite difficult, but you can use your strategies for the close reading session that we did at Collaboration Day to get students to engage with text that is difficult, but also in a meaningful way. So for our ATLs for this unit, I picked out 3. The first is read critically for comprehension. Students will be able to do this anytime that they're engaging with a primary source document because they're going to have to critically read to be able to comprehend the content because it is a little difficult. They'll also practice making inferences and drawing conclusions. One example of doing this is in the lesson about the Battle of San Jacinto. Students are given a painting of the battle and are asked to make inferences and draw conclusions about what happened at the end of the Texas Revolution based solely on that image. And then finally, the last ATL that we're looking at in this unit is how to organize and depict information logically. And this is why students are getting a lot of opportunities to work with graphic organizers so they can look at multiple different ways to record information that is visual and that is organized so that they can keep their thoughts organized, because there is a lot of timeline that they need to be able to keep straight with the events leading up to the revolution and the events of the revolution itself, as well as the impact. So for example, they'll use a graphic organizer to record the causes, findings, and effects of the Mary Tiran report, which historically is something that students really struggle with. And then finally, we'll talk about the SOI connections throughout this unit. The SOI, just as a reminder, is that people will revolt if they do not feel a sense of identity within their system of government. So in Unit 1, we look at the impact of the Law of April 6, 1830 on Anglo-settler identity. That law is very jarring to Anglo-settlers because it really does go against their core values. So we see the inner conflict starting to brew with that. In Lesson 5, we look at how the Anglos are actually revolting against the Mexican identity through the different battles of the Texas Revolution. In Lessons 6 and 7, we see the Texans create their own identity through their founding documents with the Constitutional Convention and the Texas Declaration of Independence and how that compares to the U.S. Declaration of Independence. And finally, in Lesson 9, we look at how the Texan and American identities join as Texas is annexed to the United States. There are a few resources for this unit uploaded on Blackboard. First, there is an AML for Lesson 9 about Texas annexation. This lesson asks students to engage in a debate with the arguments for and against annexation, but also teaches them the skill of parallel argumentation, which is really cool. And there are 3 readings uploaded, one which is the Turtle Bayou Resolutions, the Texas and U.S. Declarations of Independence, and then Life in the Texas Republic. All of these are in the format of Read Like a Historian. So they'll include contextualization, close reading, and after reading questions. And if you get behind in this unit, first of all, it's okay. You can always figure out a way to get yourself back on track. And if you need any help figuring out how to do that, you're more than welcome to reach out to me or to any other Texas history teacher in the network. I would suggest, if you do get behind, to build in time throughout the unit to do the performance assessment rather than take an entire class day to do that. I also suggest that you could cut Lesson 10 and integrate that information into either your performance assessment or add it on to Lesson 9, although that would make Lesson 9 pretty dense. Or you could also make it a mini lesson in lesson right before you do the performance assessment if you choose to do it that way. And as always, call, text, or email me with any questions. My contact information is on the screen. I don't have a preference between phone or email, but please do not suffer in silence and reach out with any questions. If not, enjoy Unit 3, and I'm excited to hear about it at our next Collab Day. Thanks. Bye.